After 8 years of marriage, she walked out with a script. But what she didn't know was, at 42, I thought I understood the architecture of a solid life. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I've been building financial portfolios for middle-class families in Charlotte, North Carolina, for the past 14 years. I was hunched over my dual monitors, fine-tuning a quarterly rebalance for a teacher's retirement account, when the sound that would shatter my existence cut through the spreadsheet numbers like a blade through silk. The front door didn't just open, it exploded inward with the force of someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Our footsteps weren't walking, they were marching, each heel strike against our hardwood floors like a countdown to detonation. And then she materialized in our living room doorway like some transformed creature I'd never seen before. She wore a pristine white blazer that caught the afternoon light, something I'd never laid eyes on despite sharing a bedroom for 8 years. Hanging from her shoulder was a canvas tote bag emblazoned with some retreat logo, gold letters spelling out words I couldn't quite make out from where I sat frozen at my desk. But it wasn't her outfit that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. It was her eyes. They looked past me, past the mahogany desk we picked out together at that furniture outlet in Concord, past the framed photos of our honeymoon in Asheville, past the house we'd spent 6 years transforming from a basic suburban shell into what I'd foolishly believed was our forever home. Her gaze landed somewhere beyond our shared reality, and when she opened her mouth, I knew with crystalline certainty that she was about to detonate my world. I refused to be defined as some man's wife anymore. The words hung in our living room air like poison gas. Each syllable had been crafted, polished, practiced during what must have been dozens of car rides home from whatever gathering had manufactured this new version of my wife. This wasn't a conversation starter. This wasn't even an argument. This was an execution. She pivoted on those new heels, when had she bought those? And walked away from 8 years of marriage like she was leaving a boring movie halfway through. The front door didn't just close behind her. It slammed with the finality of a coffin lid dropping into place. But here's what truly demolished whatever remained of my heart. Outside in our driveway, a car was idling. Not just any car, but one filled with her new sisterhood, these women who'd been coaching her toward this exact moment. I heard their voices through our bay windows, these strangers who knew my marriage was ending before I did. Congratulations, girl. This is your rebirth moment. You're finally free. Their celebration of my devastation was like having my soul flayed alive while an audience cheered. The engine revved, tires crunched over the gravel we'd laid together 2 summers ago, and the sound of their victory parade faded into the distance, leaving me sitting in a silence so complete it felt like being buried alive. I remained paralyzed in my desk chair for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The spreadsheet still glowed on my second monitor, Mrs. Patterson's retirement allocation waiting for a minor adjustment that suddenly seemed laughably insignificant. My hands trembled as I completed the entry, saved the file, and placed my palms flat against the cool wood surface. There was nothing to chase, nothing to debate, nothing to salvage. The sentence she delivered wasn't an invitation for discussion, it was a declaration of war. And the most soul-crushing realization of all? The enemy army had been gathering in plain sight for months, while I'd been blind, deaf, and pathetically trusting. The signs hadn't just been there, they'd been practically screaming at me. First came the books, these glossy manifestos with titles like Reclaiming Your Power and Breaking Free from Codependency lined up on her nightstand like little soldiers. The covers always faced outward, as if she wanted me to see them, to ask questions she was dying to answer with her newly acquired vocabulary of empowerment. Then the podcast began infiltrating our morning routines. Instead of the news we used to share over coffee, her phone became a constant stream of voices talking about recognizing manipulation and setting boundaries with toxic partners. She'd sit across from me at our breakfast table, nodding along to these strangers who apparently understood her life better than the man she'd promised to love and honor. The language shift was like watching someone learn a foreign dialect. Suddenly, our simple dinner plans became attempts at control. Our shared budget transformed into financial restriction tactics. Our quiet Saturday mornings evolved into forced isolation from my support network. Every ordinary aspect of our married life got reframed through this new lens of victimhood and oppression. The retreat invitations started arriving in March. Not physical invitations, those would have been too honest. Instead, they came through group texts and whispered phone calls that moved from our kitchen to behind closed doors. Personal growth workshops, and empowerment weekends that promised to help women rediscover their authentic selves. Her new circle of advisors expanded like cancer. There was Brenda from her dental office, a twice-divorced woman who spoke about marriage like it was a communicable disease. There was our neighbor Janet, who'd left her husband of 15 years for a yoga instructor and now made dramatic pronouncements about breaking patterns of domestic submission. And then there was the ringleader, Clarissa, a life coach who'd never been married but had strong opinions about everyone else's relationships. These women descended on our home like locusts. They'd arrive unannounced with their motivational workbooks and their knowing glances, transforming our kitchen table into some kind of underground headquarters for marital revolution. Group chats filled her evenings, her phone buzzing with messages that arrived in coordinated bursts whenever we tried to discuss anything practical. Mortgage renewal? They had opinions. Vacation planning? They saw control tactics. Tax preparation? Obviously another method of financial manipulation. Our beautifully balanced life began crumbling under the weight of their constant interference. For 8 years, we'd operated like a well-oiled machine. I handled long-term financial planning and investment strategies. She managed our social calendar and kept our household logistics running smoothly. It wasn't rigid or oppressive. It was simply what worked for two people who respected each other's strengths. But according to her new council of advisors, our division of labor was evidence of my systematic oppression. Every role I'd naturally assumed became proof of my controlling nature. Every decision we'd made together got reinterpreted as evidence of my manipulation. The calendar that once reflected our shared priorities suddenly became a battleground. Her events multiplied like rabbits, lunch meetings with her empowerment crew, weekend workshops on reclaiming feminine power, evening sessions about breaking free from patriarchal expectations. When I suggested we might want one quiet dinner together or perhaps a weekend without house guests, I was immediately labeled as someone trying to limit her growth. 2 months before that devastating afternoon, she floated the idea of a trial separation for clarity. The words came out so casually, like she was suggesting we try a new restaurant. When I asked directly if there was someone else, her response was swift and vicious. "That question proves exactly what they said about you," she hissed, her eyes flashing with a coldness I'd never seen before. "You're paranoid, controlling, and you can't stand the thought of me having an independent life." The conversation ended there, but something fundamental shifted in our house. The air itself felt different, charged with an electricity that made every interaction feel dangerous. I started walking on eggshells in my own home, carefully measuring every word to avoid triggering another lecture about my supposedly toxic behavior. But here's what none of her empowerment coaches understood about me: I don't operate on drama and emotion. I work with numbers, patterns, and evidence. Numbers don't lie, they don't manipulate, and they don't gaslight you into questioning your own reality. So while she was busy rewriting the history of our marriage with her new sisterhood, I was quietly observing and documenting the truth. I'm methodical by nature and catastrophically thorough when threatened, so I began keeping records. Not out of spite or paranoia, but because I could see exactly where this was heading, and I refused to be caught unprepared when the inevitable explosion occurred. The prenuptial agreement became my North Star. We'd both signed it willingly before our wedding, drafted by her attorney, a detail that would prove crucial later. She'd actually insisted on it, claiming it would protect both our interests and eliminate any financial pressure from our relationship. "This way we know we're marrying for love, not money," she'd said, kissing me after we'd both signed our names. I made a photocopy the same week she changed her phone password to something I didn't recognize. I slipped it into my desk drawer behind our tax returns, where it waited like a loaded weapon I prayed I'd never need to use. But I didn't stop there. Every voicemail that mentioned money, assets, or separation got saved. Every text message that hinted at her future plans got exported to a dated folder on my computer. When her friends started coaching her on speakerphone calls in our car, I noted the times and pulled the phone logs later. When Clarissa stood in our kitchen offering strategic advice while the doorbell camera captured every word of their conspiracy, I saved those audio clips too. Nothing illegal, nothing secretive, just ordinary records created by the ordinary devices that people forget are constantly documenting their lives. While she was busy crafting her narrative of oppression and control, I was preserving the actual evidence of our marriage's final months. The day she walked out of our house forever, I felt something I'd never experienced before, a combination of devastating heartbreak and crystal clear relief. The uncertainty was finally over. The woman I'd loved was gone, replaced by this manufactured version of herself, and now I could stop pretending otherwise. I stood up from my desk on legs that felt disconnected from my body and walked to our kitchen. My hands shook as I filled the kettle, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally knowing exactly what I was dealing with. Our golden retriever, Bailey, looked up from his bed by the sliding door, tail wagging hopefully. He had no idea that Mommy wasn't coming home tonight, or ever again. The first thing I did was check our bank accounts. No unusual transfers, no surprise withdrawals, no evidence of financial preparation on her part. For all her strategic planning with her empowerment team, she'd apparently forgotten to secure her own resources before declaring war. I checked our shared calendars next. Her schedule for the following 2 weeks was packed solid: lunches, shopping trips, and celebration dinners with the same three women who'd been orchestrating this entire performance. They'd planned her victory tour before she'd even executed her grand exit. I didn't call her. There was nothing urgent to discuss, and I sure as hell wasn't going to provide content for whatever group text was analyzing my every move. Instead, I found the tote bag she'd tossed carelessly near our front door. Apparently the prop had served its purpose. Inside, I discovered the debris of her transformation: workshop workbooks filled with exercises about identifying toxic patterns, a receipt for a $200 silver bracelet from some artisan shop, printed handouts with titles like 10 Steps to Reclaim Your Authentic Identity. I examined each item like an archaeologist studying the artifacts of a collapsed civilization, then carefully returned everything to the bag and placed it on the bench in our laundry room. In the basket beside our washer, I found a load of her clothes from earlier that week, still warm and sweet smelling from the dryer. My hands moved automatically, folding each piece with the same care I'd shown for 8 years, placing them in a neat stack on the chair in our bedroom. The bed was still made from this morning, the blinds half open, afternoon sunlight streaming across the hardwood floors we'd refinished together 3 years ago. It looked like any other Tuesday afternoon in our marriage. Except it wasn't our marriage anymore, and it would never be again. Back at my desk, I opened the small safe hidden behind my filing cabinet and confirmed what I already knew was there: the prenup copy, our marriage certificate, the deed to our house, insurance policies, and the external drive containing months of documentation I'd hoped I'd never need. I plugged in the drive just long enough to verify that my most recent exports were complete, then returned it to the safe. On a yellow sticky note, I wrote the date and attached it to the prenup copy. If I needed to reference anything later, I wouldn't be working from memory or emotion. Then I began the methodical process of protecting myself. I changed my email recovery contacts, updated cloud backup settings, and added my brother Kevin as a secondary emergency contact in my medical files. I located the spare house key in our kitchen bowl. Hers was still there, a small piece of metal that represented 8 years of shared trust, now feeling like evidence of my spectacular Navit. But I left it there. There was no benefit in rushing or making dramatic gestures. Everything could proceed at a measured, reasonable pace. Clear steps, documented decisions, no room for emotional manipulation or revisionist history. By early evening, our house had settled into a silence so profound it felt like being inside a tomb. I cooked scrambled eggs and toast, simple, mechanical tasks that required just enough focus to keep my mind from spiraling into the abyss of what I'd lost. Her place setting remained exactly as she'd left it from breakfast, coffee mug still stained with her lipstick, napkin folded beside an empty plate. I left it all untouched, not out of hope that had died the moment she walked out our door, but because I wasn't ready to start erasing the physical evidence of what we'd been before her transformation began. I took a short walk around our neighborhood, past the houses where normal couples were probably having normal disagreements about normal things. When I returned, my phone showed 2 work-related texts and a promotional email. Nothing from her. Not an explanation, not an apology, not even a logistical question about retrieving her belongings. I sent exactly one message: I'm at the house. Your belongings remain where you left them. If you need to schedule a time for additional pickup, please let me know. Courteous, professional, complete, no emotion, no accusations, no desperate pleas for reconsideration. Just information and an offer to facilitate the practical aspects of our separation. Then I closed my laptop and sat with the devastating reality of what my life had become. A marriage can fail slowly over years of accumulated resentments, or it can be executed in a single afternoon by someone who's been planning your destruction while sleeping in your bed. Ours had been the latter, a carefully orchestrated assassination that I'd been too trusting, too comfortable, too stupidly in love to see coming. The woman who'd stood in our doorway that afternoon wasn't my wife anymore. She was a stranger wearing my wife's face, speaking words written by other people, performing a role she'd been coached to play. The person I'd loved, trusted, and built a life with had been systematically erased and replaced by this manufactured version of female empowerment. But here's what her council of advisors had catastrophically underestimated. I might have been blindsided by her betrayal, but I wasn't going to be destroyed by it. While they'd been busy turning her into a weapon aimed at my heart, I'd been quietly preparing for exactly this scenario. The next chapter of this story would be documented, dated, and handled according to the legal agreement we'd both signed when we still believed in forever. What came next would proceed step by methodical step, because that's how adults handle the end of contracts, even contracts of the heart. She returned the following afternoon like a conquering general surveying her battlefield. But she didn't come alone, she brought her entire empowerment army with her. Clarissa and Janet flanked her like bodyguards as they walked past me without so much as a nod of acknowledgement, setting their designer purses on our kitchen island like they owned the place. Clarissa immediately opened our refrigerator and asked what she wanted to drink, as if this was her house, her refrigerator, her right to make herself comfortable while helping to destroy my marriage. Janet held up her phone and instructed my wife to say something inspirational for the girls. Apparently, this moment of marital devastation needed to be documented and shared with their online audience of fellow husband disposers. "I feel so clear and liberated," she announced to the camera, her voice carrying this artificial brightness that made my skin crawl. "I'm finally done with living small and accepting limitations." I remained in the living room, finishing an email to a client about their children's college fund, ironic, considering my own life was imploding while I helped others plan their futures. When I stood to refill my water glass, I nodded politely to each of them and continued to the kitchen sink. Not rudeness, boundaries. I wasn't going to pretend this was a social visit or that their presence in my home was welcome. That evening, the social media campaign began in earnest. Post after post appeared on her accounts, photos of coffee cups and inspirational quotes, captions about day one of authentic living and breaking free from toxic patterns. The comments section filled with encouragement from the same circle of women who'd been strategically positioned in our house all week. A mutual friend forwarded one of the posts to me with nothing but a question mark. I responded with surgical precision, "We're navigating some changes." Then I took screenshots of everything and filed them by date because I wanted a complete record of how this narrative was being constructed and shared. But the real revelation came when their phone calls moved to speaker mode. Suddenly, I was hearing my name discussed more frequently than I had in the previous 3 months combined. "He's so controlled and measured," one voice analyzed. "Classic emotional manipulator. He'll totally fold if you keep pushing," another predicted. "These quiet types always crumble under pressure." They discussed my supposedly oppressive behavior like amateur psychologists diagnosing a patient they'd never met. My work became narrow and controlling, our shared financial planning transformed into economic abuse, our quiet evenings together reframed as isolation tactics. When she repeated these talking points to me later, delivering them with the confidence of original thought, the betrayal felt even more complete. The woman I'd loved had become a puppet, mouthing words written by strangers who'd convinced her to see our entire marriage through the lens of victimhood and oppression. "What exactly do you want from me right now?" I asked during our longest exchange that week. "I want you to accept that I'm not your wife in the way you've always expected," she replied, using language that sounded like it had been rehearsed. "What does that mean in practical terms?" "It means I'm free to build my own life without asking permission or justifying my choices to anyone." The conversation felt like negotiating with a hostage who'd started sympathizing with their captors. Every response had been pre-programmed, every position strategically planned. There was no room for actual dialogue because she'd already been told exactly what I would say and how she should respond. On Wednesday, she informed me that the dresser in our bedroom needed to be removed because it felt too masculine and was taking up space she needed for her authentic self. 2 friends arrived with her and stood in the doorway like witnesses while she pointed at various pieces of furniture that apparently represented my patriarchal oppression. "I'll arrange for pickup," I said calmly. "Can you provide a written list of everything you want removed?" She actually rolled her eyes at this request, as if asking for clarity about which of our shared possessions she wanted to eliminate was somehow unreasonable. But she wrote the list, and I stored it with the growing collection of documents that were telling the real story of our marriage's end. That night, I heard her on the phone telling someone I was surprisingly cooperative when being monitored. The implication was clear. She believed my reasonable behavior was somehow calculated or performative, rather than simply how mature adults handle difficult situations. Thursday brought her suggestion that we try a trial separation for clarity. She presented this like it was a fresh idea, rather than something her empowerment team had obviously been coaching her toward for weeks. "Do you have a location in mind?" I asked. "I might stay with a friend who understands what I'm going through," she replied, meaning one of her new sisterhood who could provide constant reinforcement for her victim narrative. "I'll need specific dates and a plan for Bailey," I said, referring to our dog. "I'll let you know," she said dismissively, then changed our Wi-Fi network name to Rebornandrizing and posted a photo of the settings screen to her social media. I immediately switched my devices to a personal hotspot and left her electronics connected to the renamed network. If she wanted to make dramatic gestures about reclaiming digital space, she was welcome to do so. I wasn't going to engage in symbolic battles over internet access. Later that evening, I received a security notification that someone had attempted to access one of my cloud storage accounts. I noted the time, changed my passwords, and moved on. The pattern of behavior was becoming perfectly clear. She was looking for evidence to support whatever narrative her coaches had convinced her to build. The weekend brought escalation. New outfits appeared daily, each one more expensive and attention-seeking than the last. She carried workbooks and printed materials everywhere, like a student cramming for an exam in advanced husband disposal. Her friends recorded short videos on our front steps, making comments about finally being able to breathe and escaping emotional imprisonment. When she spoke to me now, it was only in short, imperious directives. "Leave the garage door open at 6. Don't wait up tonight. I'll be out late with people who support my growth." I kept my responses equally brief and precise. "Garage door will be open. I won't wait up." "Understood." Friday night brought the first direct attack on my character. She positioned herself by the kitchen sink like a prosecutor addressing a jury and accused me of using my calm demeanor as a manipulation tactic. "You're withholding emotional responses to punish me," she declared, clearly repeating something she'd been coached to say. "You told me you didn't want a traditional marriage," I replied evenly. "I'm giving you the space and independence you requested." "You're trying to make me look like the villain in this situation," she accused. "I'm not discussing our private matters with anyone outside this house," I answered truthfully. She stormed out and immediately resumed a phone conversation on our back patio. Within minutes, I heard my name being discussed again, my responses analyzed and dissected by her team of amateur therapists. I put in earbuds and finished reconciling a client's investment portfolio while my marriage disintegrated in real time just outside our sliding glass door. Saturday brought a new level of public performance. She posted photos from a rooftop bar with captions about celebrating freedom after years of suffocation. A mutual friend texted asking if we were officially splitting. "We're discussing next steps," I replied, maintaining the same neutral tone I'd used to discuss a client's asset allocation. She returned home late and walked past me like I was furniture, then asked if I'd given any thought to moving out of our house. "I won't be abandoning the house or Bailey," I told her firmly. "If you want to formalize a separation, we can handle that through proper legal channels." She blinked hard and stared at the floor. "You always have to make everything legal and cold." "Legal procedures protect both parties," I replied. "They prevent emotions from making poor financial decisions for people." She had no response to that because her empowerment coaches had apparently never prepared her for someone who insisted on handling adult matters like an adult. Sunday morning brought a call from her mother, who'd obviously received a heavily edited version of our situation. "She just needs room to grow and find herself," her mother explained, as if I'd been keeping my wife locked in a basement instead of supporting her career and respecting her choices for 8 years. "Please don't sabotage her opportunities by being difficult about this." I assured her mother that I wanted whatever was best for her daughter, which was completely true. If what was best for her was a life without me, then that's what she should have, along with all the financial and practical responsibilities that came with that choice. By late Sunday, the pattern had crystallized into something almost mathematical in its predictability. Public confidence when her support team was around, private agitation when I refused to engage beyond practical logistics. She'd drop inflammatory statements and scan my face for cracks in my composure. I'd ask concrete questions about timelines and procedures, and she'd shift to accusations about my coldness or legalistic approach. She was prepared for scenes, arguments, dramatic confrontations where she could play the victim and I could play the controlling monster. What she wasn't prepared for was someone who insisted on treating the end of a marriage like the end of any other contract, with clear communication, documented agreements, and respect for the legal framework we'd established when we still believed in forever. Monday morning arrived with 2 packed suitcases and an announcement that she'd be staying elsewhere for the week. Her friends waited in the car with the engine running like getaway drivers after a bank robbery. "Do you have a key to this other location?" I asked. "Obviously," she replied with exaggerated patience. "I'll need an address for emergency purposes." "I'll text it to you," she promised, though the text never came. "When would you like to collect the remaining items from your list?" "I'll coordinate with the girls and let you know." She paused in our doorway, looking back at the living room where she delivered her Declaration of Independence just 1 week earlier. "You're not even going to try to stop me," she said, and for the first time since this began, her voice cracked slightly. "You made your decision last Monday," I replied. "I heard you clearly." After her car disappeared around the corner, I walked through our house methodically, taking photographs of every room. Not sentimental photos, but inventory documentation. I saved them in a folder labeled with the date and room names, then uploaded them to secure cloud storage. I checked our banking again, no unusual activity. I reviewed our shared credit card account and discovered that she'd attempted a large purchase at some boutique clothing store, but it had been declined because I'd reduced discretionary spending limits weeks earlier when the red flags had become impossible to ignore. I sent her one text: "Let me know when you'd like to collect the remaining items from your written list. I'll be available after 6 tonight." That evening brought one final attempt at manipulation through social media. I discovered I'd been added to a group text conversation I hadn't known existed, where my wife had been presenting a carefully curated version of our marriage to a wider audience. According to her narrative, I was a controlling monster who'd isolated her from friends and monitored her every move. I read through months of messages without responding, took screenshots of everything, then left the group chat within 5 minutes. The details she'd shared bore no resemblance to the household logs, calendars, or financial records that documented our actual life together. 2 minutes after I left the chat, she texted demanding to know why I'd been spying on her support network. "I was added by someone else and left immediately," I replied factually. "You could show some grace during this transition," she wrote back. "We can show each other grace by sticking to factual information," I responded, then put my phone in airplane mode for the rest of the evening. The week ended with a quiet dinner at my kitchen counter, scrambled eggs again, simple and mechanical. I cleaned the dishes, filed the grocery receipt with my other household documentation, and confirmed that all my important papers were still secure and accessible. Before bed, I sent one final message: "If you intend to file separation papers, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll begin the legal process this Friday." There was no reply. I turned off the lights and slept better than I had in months, because the uncertainty was finally over. The pressure had peaked, I'd asked all my questions, and now it was time to move the entire matter from the realm of feelings and manipulation into the clear, documented world of legal procedure. That was not cruelty. That was adulthood. Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp, I sat across from my attorney in a conference room that smelled like leather and old law books. The walls were neutral beige, the clock kept perfect time, and the atmosphere was refreshingly free of emotional manipulation and amateur psychology. I opened my briefcase and laid out a comprehensive binder, prenup copy with original signatures, inventory photos from every room in our house, screenshots of her public social media posts, documentation of the group text I'd been added to and immediately exited, call logs, doorbell camera audio from the day she declared her rebirth, and a detailed timeline of every date her empowerment team had entered our house uninvited. My attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in complex marital dissolutions, read through the prenuptial agreement first, paying particular attention to the infidelity clause we both agreed to include. "This is exceptionally well drafted," she said, making notes in the margins. "Both parties were represented by counsel during negotiations?" "Yes." She insisted on the prenup initially, and her attorney spent 2 weeks reviewing every detail. Patricia asked 2 specific questions about verification procedures, and I answered with exact file names and storage locations. We signed the retainer agreement and began building our case systematically. Exhibit A, prenuptial agreement, signed and notarized by both parties after a 5-day review period. Exhibit B, financial statements showing my premarital assets and current account balances. Exhibit C, property titles for house, vehicles, and business interests. Exhibit D, screenshots of social media posts that directly contradict any claims of being trapped or controlled. Exhibit E, audio recordings from our entry camera capturing her announcement of independence while her friends cheered in the background. Exhibit F, text message threads where she explicitly described testing other options. Exhibit G, the written list she'd provided for furniture removal along with photographic evidence of those items. Each piece of evidence received a label, a digital checksum, and a chain of custody notation. Nothing sloppy, no emotional appeals, no gaps in documentation that could be exploited later. Patricia drafted 2 letters with surgical precision. The first was a preservation notice, legally requiring my wife and anyone advising her to maintain all digital communications, location data, and financial records related to our marriage. The second letter summarized the prenup terms in language so clear that even her empowerment coaches couldn't misinterpret it. My premarital assets remained separate and protected. My business interests remained mine alone. Home equity would be divided according to the specific schedule we'd both agreed to years earlier. Personal property belonged to whoever was currently using it. Spousal support was completely waived in cases of infidelity and otherwise capped at exactly 12 months. The settlement offer attached to Patricia's letter matched our prenuptial agreement word for word, no more generous, no less fair than what we'd both signed when we still believed in happily ever after. Before sending anything, I made the practical adjustments that would protect my financial future. I redirected my paycheck to a new account in my name only, reviewed all automatic payments to ensure essential household bills would continue being paid on schedule, and reduced discretionary spending limits on our joint credit card to exactly $0. I created a detailed budget for the next 3 months with 2 columns, one showing the household obligations I would continue covering to maintain our home, and another listing the discretionary expenses that would stop immediately. I kept this documentation for court records and for my own peace of mind. Then I wrote to her directly. The email fit on a single screen and covered everything that needed to be addressed. Future communication would be in writing only. I proposed 2 specific time windows for collecting her remaining belongings and asked her to select one. I established clear rules: no visitors inside the house during pickups, no filming or recording inside our private space, and all item removal limited strictly to things on her written list. I suggested a temporary schedule for Bailey that prioritized his well-being over our personal conflict. I ended with one sentence that would prove prophetic: my legal counsel will send you a preservation notice and a settlement proposal that matches our prenuptial agreement exactly. Her response arrived 6 minutes later, and it was everything I'd expected. She accused me of weaponizing paperwork and intimidating her with legal threats. She declared her intention to seek half of everything plus fair spousal support for the years I invested in this relationship. I replied with 2 words: contact counsel. She called twice within the next hour. I let both calls go to voicemail, where she could speak freely without any possibility of misinterpretation later. The messages were exactly what I'd predicted: emotional appeals mixed with veiled threats about what people would think if I forced her to fight for basic fairness. Her third message arrived as a text: did you ever actually love me, or was this all just a business transaction to you? I didn't respond. Not because I was heartless, but because that question had a simple answer that she wouldn't want to hear. I'd loved her completely, trusted her absolutely, and supported her unconditionally for 8 years. She'd responded by systematically destroying our marriage while performing victimhood for an audience of strangers. 2 hours later, her attorney sent Patricia a demand letter claiming I'd coerced my wife into signing the prenuptial agreement and that my calculating behavior during our separation proved I'd been manipulating her for years. Patricia's response was a masterpiece of legal precision. She attached our original prenup with both signatures, documentation of the 5-day review period my wife had used before signing, her attorney's signature from that time, and text messages from our engagement period where she'd explicitly confirmed her satisfaction with all terms. We included the infidelity clause that voided spousal support entirely, along with evidence of her testing other options during our marriage. The settlement offer remained completely unchanged, exactly what our prenuptial agreement specified, nothing more and nothing less. That night brought one last attempt at emotional manipulation. She appeared on our front porch with a friend waiting in the car, asking if we could talk like the adults we used to be. I stepped outside and closed the door firmly behind me, keeping my hands visible and my voice level. All legal matters go through our attorneys now, I said clearly. Your belongings are packed and organized by room. Please select a pickup time from the email I sent. Are you actually recording this conversation? She asked, glancing at our doorbell camera. The device records as usual, I confirmed. It's been in the same location for 3 years. Are you really going to leave me with nothing after everything I gave up for this marriage? You'll receive exactly what our prenuptial agreement provides, I replied with absolute certainty. Nothing less than we agreed to, nothing more than you're legally entitled to. She turned toward her friend and said loudly enough for the camera to capture, "He's completely heartless." "I won't discuss emotions on the front porch," I stated clearly, then went back inside and locked the door. The next morning brought news that made my blood sing with vindication. Patricia called to inform me that my wife's attorney had requested an emergency hearing for exclusive use of the residence and interim spousal support, basically asking a judge to kick me out of my own house and force me to pay her bills while she figured out her next move. Our response was devastating in its completeness. We submitted bank records proving I'd continued paying every household obligation without interruption. We provided my detailed budget showing exactly which expenses I was covering to maintain our home. We demonstrated the complete absence of any threats, harassment, or attempts to interfere with her activities. But the kill shot was the preservation letter she'd ignored. Instead of maintaining digital evidence as legally required, she'd immediately deleted several social media posts after receiving our first demand. We attached screenshots of her friends entering our house uninvited, filming in our private entry, and discussing strategies for documenting his reactions. We asked the court for the exact opposite of what she wanted: exclusive use of the residence for me, a protective order preventing any further dissipation of assets, and a requirement that all future property pickups follow our written schedule with no filming or recording allowed inside our private home. By midweek, the pressure on her side had intensified beyond anything her empowerment coaches had prepared her for. Two of her closest advisors received preservation letters at their workplace email addresses because that's where they'd been coordinating their interference in my marriage. One of them wrote to me directly, demanding I stop involving innocent people in our personal drama. I forwarded her message to Patricia without comment. Every piece of outside interference was now documented evidence of the conspiracy that had systematically destroyed my marriage while I'd remained completely unaware. My attorney called me after the emergency hearing with news that made me want to dance on our kitchen table. The judge had declined every single one of my wife's requests. No interim support payments while the prenup was under review. No exclusive use of the house for someone who'd voluntarily abandoned it. No emergency funds for someone who'd made no attempt to budget for their chosen independence. But the court granted everything we'd requested: scheduled property pickups with no filming allowed, temporary exclusive use of our home with Bailey remaining under my care according to the schedule I'd proposed. Most importantly, a clear judicial statement that filming inside someone's private residence without consent was inappropriate and potentially illegal. With court orders in place, I completed the final phase of my protection strategy. I opened a post office box and rerouted all financial statements away from our house. I placed fraud alerts on my credit reports and updated every emergency contact to remove her name. I informed my company's HR department that any spousal benefit changes should wait for final divorce orders. I established a daily schedule that limited divorce-related activities to exactly 1 hour after work, refusing to let this chaos bleed into my professional responsibilities or personal peace of mind. My clients continued receiving their reports on time, our house remained spotlessly maintained, and my financial records stayed perfectly organized. Her response shifted from public accusations to desperate negotiations. Her attorney floated a new proposal, a single lump sum payment to close this chapter cleanly and avoid the expense of prolonged litigation. We declined immediately and restated our position with crystalline clarity. The prenuptial agreement would be enforced exactly as written. No additional payments, no renegotiated terms, no rewards for abandoning our marriage and attempting to manipulate the legal system. He suggested mediation as a more humane alternative to courtroom battles. We agreed, but with non-negotiable conditions: neutral mediator, complete financial disclosure of any accounts opened during the past year, and preservation of all social media posts until final resolution. That night, she texted asking if we could handle this privately and avoid involving lawyers in our personal business. I responded with absolute finality: "We will resolve this according to the legal agreement we both signed." No exceptions. The first scheduled pickup arrived exactly on time, and for the first time in weeks, she came alone. I'd organized her belongings with the same meticulous care I brought to everything else: clothes sorted by season and labeled by closet location, personal accessories gathered in clear bags, chargers and electronics bundled together with rubber bands. I kept the garage door open and waited inside the house, listening for the sound of her car trunk closing. She moved efficiently through the boxes, loading everything without drama or delay. Before leaving, she paused at the door connecting our garage to the kitchen and looked directly at the security camera. Goodbye, Marcus, she said to no one in particular, her voice carrying a weight I hadn't heard since before her transformation began. I didn't move or respond. When her car pulled away, I walked into the garage, confirmed that all designated items had been removed, and sent Patricia a brief update. First pickup completed without incident. 2 days later, something beautiful happened. Her attorney withdrew the demand for spousal support entirely and requested only the property division specified in our original prenup, plus a mutual agreement that neither party would disparage the other publicly. We accepted the non-disparagement clause immediately and added our own requirement. No third parties allowed on our property during future exchanges, no posting about the divorce proceedings on any platform, and mutual blocking of each other on all social media accounts. He agreed to every condition within hours. By month's end, our divorce looked exactly like the document we'd signed during happier times, because I'd refused to let emotion, manipulation, or amateur psychology change the fundamental facts. I'd kept meticulous records, followed legal procedures, and limited all communication to matters that actually required decisions. I hadn't made dramatic announcements or managed other people's opinions. I'd let the court orders, the documented evidence, and our prenuptial agreement do all the speaking necessary. The result was elegant in its simplicity. The agreement held, the house remained secure, all accounts stayed intact, and the path to final divorce orders was completely clear. I was done playing games, chasing explanations, or managing anyone else's emotional journey. I'd set clear boundaries, honored the contract we'd both signed, and protected the life I'd built through my own hard work. When she chose a different path, I'd accepted her choice completely and moved our entire relationship from the realm of feelings into the clean, documented world of legal procedure. That wasn't cruelty or manipulation. That was simply how adults handle the end of contracts, even the most important contracts of the heart. 2 days after the hearing, something happened that made my soul sing with vindication. She posted a carefully vague caption about surviving emotional manipulation that named no one specifically but clearly implied I'd been controlling and isolating her throughout our marriage. Patricia sent a preservation notice within 2 hours, referencing our non-disparagement agreement and the court's warning about social media behavior. The post disappeared before I'd even finished reading it, but the screenshots were already safely stored in our legal files. The next day brought a brief status call with the judge, who reminded both parties that court orders applied to implications and innuendos as well as direct statements. No sanctions were imposed, but the warning went on the official record. Her empowerment team noticed the deletion immediately. The same women who'd been cheerleading her authentic journey suddenly found themselves recipients of preservation letters at their workplace email addresses. One responded with outrage, another sent a terse message stating she would not be involved in legal proceedings. Within a week, the triumphant sisterhood that had once filled our kitchen with revolutionary planning sessions had completely evaporated. The friends who'd filmed celebratory videos on our front steps no longer wanted their names associated with any aspect of our divorce. Group chat invitations stopped appearing on her phone. Workshop announcements disappeared from her social media feed. The entire support network that had coached her toward marital destruction melted away the moment actual legal consequences became possible. At the second scheduled pickup, she arrived wearing a new dress and attempted one final manipulation. She stood close to me in our garage, speaking in the soft, intimate voice she'd used during our early dating years. "We used to be so good together," she whispered, placing her hand on my forearm like she had 1,000 times before. "We could reset everything if you just paused the legal proceedings." I stepped back exactly half a pace, maintaining eye contact while creating physical distance. "We will follow the documents we both signed," I replied in the same measured tone I'd use with any client. She glanced toward our front door, where the security camera had been recording our interaction for the past 3 years. "This whole process feels so humiliating," she said, apparently forgetting that humiliation is a natural consequence of publicly destroying a marriage and then discovering you have no legal leverage. "Legal procedures protect both parties equally," I responded. "They prevent emotions from making poor decisions." She loaded her remaining boxes without another word, and I documented the successful completion of our second exchange. The following week brought a revised settlement proposal from her attorney, a one-time payment to avoid the expenses and emotional toll of prolonged litigation. We declined immediately and sent back the exact same terms we'd been offering since day one. No additional payments, no renegotiated conditions, no rewards for attempted manipulation. That same day, I received an unexpected email from my company's HR department asking if I needed any schedule accommodations during this difficult time. I declined the offer and confirmed that my work performance had remained completely unaffected by personal circumstances. My client reports continued arriving on schedule, my financial analyses maintained their usual precision, and my professional calendar stayed exactly as organized as it had been before my marriage imploded. The stability of my work life made the chaos on her side even more visible by contrast. A mutual friend forwarded me screenshots from a private group where she'd been collecting sympathy from people who didn't know the full story. He included his own message. I had no idea about the prenup. This changes everything. I saved the screenshots to our legal files and closed the conversation thread. When she discovered that her private venting had been shared, she accused me of orchestrating surveillance of her personal communications. I replied with simple facts. Third parties sent unsolicited information. I preserve anything related to our case as legally required. She stopped texting me for several days after that, apparently realizing that every form of communication was being documented and could potentially be used as evidence. Her financial situation began deteriorating rapidly. The joint credit card showed multiple declined charges for hotel rooms because I'd reduced discretionary limits to 0 months earlier. She emailed asking me to approve one night for safety purposes, apparently forgetting that she declared her complete independence and should have planned accordingly. I told her to submit any requests for temporary house access through her attorney, following the pickup schedule we'd already established. She never sent one. Instead, she spent a week sleeping on Clarissa's couch before moving to a small sublet apartment across town. Her attorney made one final attempt at requesting interim support, and Patricia responded by citing the specific clause in our prenup that waived all support payments, plus the court's previous ruling about maintaining the status quo. The request was withdrawn before our next scheduled call. The mysterious other options she'd been testing during our marriage never materialized during any pickup. One evening, I overheard her leaving a voicemail that sounded like a plea for someone to meet her, but whoever she'd been counting on had apparently disappeared along with her empowerment team. When she asked if Bailey could spend an extra night at her new apartment, I agreed and requested the handoff time in writing. She returned him exactly on schedule, looking tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "Do you hate me now?" she asked as I attached Bailey's leash. "Hate requires emotional investment," I replied honestly. "This is about fulfilling legal obligations, not personal feelings." Then I went back inside and closed the door. The non-disparagement clause began working in ways she hadn't anticipated. A neighbor who'd witnessed her friends filming confrontational videos told her that our street didn't appreciate crowds gathering in residential entryways. He delivered the same message to me separately, making it clear that the entire neighborhood had noticed her performance and found it inappropriate. Now the only activity on our front porch was properly scheduled pickups. The doorbell recordings reflected this change. Our house had returned to the same peaceful rhythm it had maintained for years before her transformation began. Her attorney proposed mediation to humanize these issues and find solutions that work for everyone. We agreed to participate but insisted on the same terms we'd maintained throughout: complete preservation of digital evidence and full financial disclosure. At the mediation session, the neutral mediator began by reviewing our prenuptial agreement and asking whether either party disputed its validity. Her attorney confirmed they were not challenging the document's legitimacy. The discussion quickly devolved into logistics, final property exchanges, removal dates for any remaining items, tax filing procedures, and drafting of a mutual release form. When the mediator asked if we wanted to include a reconciliation clause, I declined immediately. Her attorney didn't even attempt to argue for one. Outside the mediation room, she approached me while her lawyer took a phone call. "I really thought you'd chase after me once I packed those suitcases," she admitted quietly. "I believed you when you said you wouldn't be a traditional wife," I replied. "Did you ever waver during these past 2 months? Even once?" "No." She nodded slowly and returned to her chair without another word. The mediator returned with a settlement draft that mirrored our original prenuptial agreement exactly. No modifications, no additional payments, no concessions to her post-marital demands for fairness. Her final attempt at leverage came through social media one more time. She posted a photo of a packed moving box with a caption about reclaiming personal space after years of suffocating routine. No names mentioned, but still a clear violation of our non-disparagement agreement. We sent another preservation notice immediately. She deleted the caption within an hour and replaced it with something neutral about new beginnings. A week later, she deactivated the entire account. My attorney filed our final stipulation and scheduled a court date for the judge to enter our dissolution order. Her attorney requested an additional week to finalize her new address for legal notifications. I agreed to the delay, and during that week she sent one last text message. I thought ending a marriage would feel different somehow. I didn't respond. Silence wasn't punishment, it was the natural result of decisions made in proper order through appropriate legal channels. Several mutual friends who'd initially supported her dramatic exit began reaching out with careful apologies. I told each of them that the matter had been resolved according to our legal agreement and wished them well in their own relationships. A neighbor who'd worried about drama affecting property values thanked me for handling everything so professionally. My calendar confirmed his observation. The same work schedules, attorney consultations, dog care routines, and sleep patterns I'd maintained throughout the entire process. No dramatic detours, no emotional breakdowns, no disruption to the life I'd built through consistent effort. The final divorce order arrived via email on a Tuesday morning at 10:47 a.m. The subject line contained our case number and the single word, entered. I opened the attachment and read every page carefully. Our prenuptial agreement had been affirmed in its entirety. All premarital assets remained separate and protected. The house stayed with me along with all associated obligations. Each party retained personal property and individual accounts. No spousal support would be paid by either side. The mutual non-disparagement clause remained in effect permanently. Each party would be responsible for their own legal fees. Property pickup schedules would continue as previously established, with filming prohibited inside private spaces. The dog custody arrangement I'd proposed during mediation was adopted as written. I forwarded the PDF to Patricia with a brief message, received and confirmed. She replied within minutes, "Congratulations on achieving closure with your dignity intact." 30 minutes later, my ex-wife texted asking if we could talk one final time without lawyers present to get some closure. I forwarded her message to Patricia and closed my phone. The legal process was complete, and I had no interest in providing emotional satisfaction to someone who'd systematically destroyed our marriage while performing victimhood for an audience. That afternoon, I completed the final administrative changes the court order permitted. I closed our joint credit line, removed her as an authorized user from any account where her name still appeared, and confirmed that all automatic payments were now drawing from accounts in my name only. I uploaded our final property inventory photos to an encrypted drive and moved the entire case folder to archived storage. Her house key went into a sealed envelope and was delivered through Patricia's office with a certified receipt. 2 days later, she completed her final pickup. She arrived alone and precisely on time. The garage door was open with her remaining belongings organized in labeled boxes along the back wall. I remained inside the house and listened for the sound of her car trunk closing. She moved efficiently through the items, loading everything without delay or drama. Before leaving, she paused at the door connecting our garage to the kitchen and looked directly at the security camera one final time. "This wasn't how I thought our story would end," she said to no one in particular. I didn't move or respond. When her car pulled away, I walked into the garage, verified that all designated property had been removed, and sent Patricia a completion notice. Final pickup concluded. All transfers complete. I changed our door locks that same evening, updated the security system codes, and disabled her device profiles from all connected systems. I revised my emergency contacts and beneficiaries, moving my brother Kevin to the primary position and adding a second local contact for Bailey's care during any future travel. I created a simple document with house management instructions and stored it in my safe. Nothing dramatic, just practical information about accounts, contacts, and key locations that someone would need in case of emergency. I sent one message to our mutual friends. "The legal matter has been resolved. Please respect both parties' privacy going forward. I won't be discussing details." Most replied with brief acknowledgments. Several sent apologies for assumptions they'd made during the early weeks of our separation. I thanked them for their understanding and wished them well in their own relationships. I stopped reading group chats that looked like commentary about our divorce. I muted and archived anything that resembled gossip or analysis. My social media accounts remained private and inactive. Work continued at its normal pace. I maintained the same client meeting schedules, report deadlines, and analysis standards I'd held for years. I added a morning routine that had nothing to do with the divorce, 3 miles on the greenway that runs behind our neighborhood, followed by a simple breakfast at my kitchen counter. Bailey adapted quickly to our new schedule. The custody handoffs remained uneventful, with times honored precisely and communications limited to logistics only. I made minimal changes inside the house. I returned our bedroom to a simpler layout, moved my desk into the spare room for better organization, and donated the furniture she'd wanted removed to a local charity. I kept our kitchen exactly as it had been and maintained the office space where I'd been working when she delivered her Declaration of Independence. She sent 2 more messages after our divorce became final. The first asked if we could meet for coffee without attorneys present, just to find some closure. I didn't respond. The second message acknowledged that she regretted how public and dramatic her initial exit had been. I archived it without replying. That became my new standard: complete silence unless legal or logistical communication was absolutely necessary. A month passed. The non-disparagement clause continued doing its work. There were no more social media captions about freedom or control. Her online accounts went completely quiet, then private, then inactive. The friends who'd once filmed dramatic videos on our front steps stopped appearing anywhere in our neighborhood. I didn't ask mutual acquaintances for updates about her life. I focused on maintaining my own household, paying the mortgage on schedule, and filing my financial reports with the same precision I'd always maintained. I scheduled a meeting with my estate attorney and updated documents I neglected during the chaos of divorce proceedings. Will, healthcare directives, powers of attorney, all properly signed and witnessed. I added specific provisions for Bailey's care in case of my injury or death, with funds designated for his support and clear instructions about his placement. I left detailed notes in my safe indicating where all important documents were stored and set calendar reminders for annual reviews of everything. The organization felt clean and complete. The mediator sent a follow-up evaluation request, asking me to rate various aspects of our process. I declined to complete it. There was nothing constructive to add, and the outcome spoke for itself. On a Sunday afternoon several weeks later, I drove past the apartment complex where she'd been living. Not to check on her or initiate contact, but because it happened to be on my route to a hardware store where I needed supplies for minor house repairs. I had no desire to stop, no curiosity about her new life, no emotional investment in her current circumstances. I was simply running errands in the life I'd successfully protected through careful planning and legal procedure. On the drive home, I realized that her last message had arrived almost 6 weeks earlier. No new attempts at contact, no drama, no demands for emotional closure that I had no obligation to provide. I kept my household running smoothly, maintained my work calendar, and honored the dog custody schedule we'd established. I booked a short vacation to visit Kevin and arranged for mail holds at my post office box. When I returned from that trip, I found one package delivered on schedule and nothing else. No messages, no emergencies, no attempts to re-engage with someone who'd made it perfectly clear that our relationship was finished. If anyone asked what I'd learned from the experience, the answer would be simple and complete. Never debate a Declaration of Independence. Believe it immediately and act accordingly. Keep detailed records of everything. Protect your assets through proper legal channels. Communicate through documents when necessary and through silence when nothing needs to be said. Most importantly, never remain in any arrangement where respect has been withdrawn and replaced with performance, manipulation, and public humiliation. One evening, a mutual friend texted that she'd moved to a different complex across town and seemed to be focusing on work and keeping to herself. I replied, wishing her the best in her new chapter, then put my phone away and took Bailey for his evening walk. Our route remained the same as it had been before everything started, past the corner house with a rose garden, down to the small park where children played on weekends, back along the tree-lined sidewalk to our front door. We returned to a clean kitchen, an organized office, and a quiet house that now contained exactly the right amount of space for the life I was actually living. I set up the coffee maker for morning, turned off all the lights, and went to bed at a reasonable hour. There were no more messages to wait for, no responses to plan, no emotional drama to manage. The boundaries I'd established were holding perfectly. The legal process had concluded with my dignity and financial security intact. I was steady, protected, and completely at peace with the choices I'd made when my marriage ended. The woman who'd once shared this house had chosen a different path, and I'd accepted her decision while refusing to be destroyed by it. That was not cruelty or emotional manipulation. That was simply how adults handle the end of contracts, even the most important contracts of the heart. And sometimes, when you refuse to play games and insist on treating people exactly as seriously as they treat themselves, you discover that you're much stronger than you ever imagined possible.